Welcome to the Strong, Single and Human podcast. A real look at single parenting, how to navigate the ups and downs of life with kids on your own while keeping sane. We cover all manner of subjects from domestic violence, dealing with childhood trauma, through to fussy eaters and how to help your kids become resilient. I'm your host, Claire Martin. Welcome. This week's guest is G. Scott Graham, who is an author of 15 books and counting, a career coach and a business coach in Boston, Massachusetts. Scott coaches clients to identify the true focus of their life, something that speaks individually to them. It means recognizing the forces that push their lives off course and adjusting to them so you get where you want to go. It means that when you are 90 years old and you look back on your life, you have a sense of pride, accomplishment, and meaning with no regrets. This guy can talk on just about anything from gardening to running an animal farm rescue, to cannabis, to long distance hiking, to grieving, to meditation, and everything in between. Facts you need to know about this week's guest. He has done 261 days in silent meditation. He's written, as I've said, 15 books. Number 16 is on its way. He has 30 advanced credentials. 1,610 nights spent sleeping outside. Don't know what that equates to in years. 12 muddy endurance obstacle races. And 2 total knee replacements. Wow. So please join me in welcoming G. Scott Graham to the podcast. So pleased you've come along.
I have to tell you, it's a privilege to be here, Claire. It is a privilege to be here.
Well, thank you. Thank you for agreeing to come along, because I know you're really busy. I know you're really busy.
Yeah.
And
well, we have a couple topics to talk about. We have the gay topic to talk about and the grief topic to talk about. What do you want to talk about today?
Well, we're going to talk about death and grief, okay? Death, but grief. I think the subject we're going to talk about today is grief. I would love to talk about my kid might be gay situation, but we'll talk about that in another interview, I think.
I'd love to come back and do that.
Yeah, no, thank you. So let's get right into it straight away. What is grief? What is it?
So an easy way to understand grief, and I'm going, maybe I should talk about this from the perspective of families and parents. And so grief is an emotion that we experience when there's something that we really value, something that's really important to us, something that really is close to our hearts. We value that, and then it's gone. And so the joy that we have for that thing is now replaced with this feeling of loss and grief.
And I've said death, right, of a person, right?
Uh-huh.
But it's not. It's death of anything. It's like death of or changing or transitioning of a situation, right?
Right.
So everything changes.
Everything changes, and grief's totally
it's a
normal.
Relationship.
Could be relationships. It could be divorce. Could be a puppy.
Could be you finished a cake and you're going to grieve because that was just the most amazing cake ever in the world. A bit different, and I'm trying to lighten this heavy mood, but it is. It's grieving, isn't it?
It is, and the piece, like I said, is how much something means to us. And so, it's interesting that for a lot of folks, especially families that have kids and those kids probably have a pet, a dog, a cat, and that dog is probably their best friend that's always with them and hanging out and sitting at their side, playing with them. That the loss of that dog, if that's one of your kids' first losses, is going to be really, really heavy. and an opportunity to teach your kids what really healthy grief is, and really why grief is a gift. One of the things we see, so we hear so much, and it's really screwed up. I can't tell you how screwed up it is. People treat grief like it's a disease.
Wow.
And people treat grief like it's like you're a pariah. Like if you have grief, Claire, if something happened to you and God forbid you lost your son, right?
Oh my God.
Just imagine the horrors of that stuff. And you're crying and you're probably crying and carrying on forever, right? I mean, it's people are going to be like, well, Jesus Christ, isn't she over it yet? Come on, how many years? Or maybe you need therapy. Maybe you need medication. There was, Priscilla Presley recently talked about the loss of her son. And it sparked a whole bunch of conversation again, because the American Psychiatric Association just added this thing about, unresolved grief, which is bullshit. It's total bullshit to their list of diseases that you treat for. And, basically it means is that you had a loss and, you're still grieving, years and years later. Well, yeah.
Well,
why wouldn't you be?
Exactly right. I mean, I can think of one time, like I lost my grandfather when I was probably mid-20s. I'm now 50, right? It still affects me to this day, but it doesn't mean to say that I don't go on with my life. Like I love my grandfather. I've just recently lost my grandmother a couple of years ago, right? And they're the only people in my life that I've lost as such, apart from pets, but, don't go there. But, you get on with it. But I actually am grateful that they were in my life. And I try and change it round to a positive. Yes, I miss them and all of those things. But I got to go on living. So, yeah. So, okay, talk about this gift thing, because this fascinates me around grief being a gift.
So
how is it a gift?
So well, can I use you as the guinea pig in this? All right.
Yeah.
So your grandmother died recently, right? Were you close? Yeah.
Yeah. She used to look after me every week. We used to go there for Christmases, all the time.
Okay, so she was pretty close. And so you probably know other people, friends, co-workers, neighbors who also have grandparents who their grandparents have died also. Their grandmother maybe died at some point recently also. Do you feel sad about their grandmother being dead or their grandfather being dead? How do you feel about their grandparents being dead?
Well, I still feel sad for them, but I don't really know their grandparents.
I mean, you can say it. I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
I don't give a shit.
Well,
they're not my. You're going to be like, oh no, people are going to see this podcast and going to say, oh, what do you mean you don't care about me?
No, but at the end of the day, I give a shit about the person I know, right?
Correct.
But I don't. I feel for them, and I don't know what death. And we're going to cover this subject. We're going to go down a rabbit hole. Death to me, I don't know what death means, right? Okay, it could be that we're being reborn on another journey if we're going to go down the hippie way, and I call it the hippie way. But I'd like to think that we're being reborn on another journey. It could be freeing us from our earthly bodies, and then our spirit is free to roam around the universe, and we get to visit different planets and all. We don't know. I mean, we really don't know.
We could wish. I think there's a lot more wishing that goes on with that piece. I mean, the thing when I think about life after death the most is, people that have had, married to a man, and then that, man died, and then they married to another man, and then that man died. And so then when they die, are they going to be in heaven having a three-way with their
God, I hope not.
How's that going to work, right? Are they going to be there with both husbands? Are both husbands going to be hooking up while they're hooking up with this? I mean, I don't know.
Oh my God, I love where you're going with this, but
we always,
oh my God, all the,
we think of like, when my mom died, she was in a really tough space when she died. She was 99 years old when she died. And,
wow.
She was not, you're not in good health when you get to that age, really. I mean, lots
my
of things
grandmother was 96.
Apart. Yeah. And so I think, when we think of if her magically being in heaven, right? I don't think of her being like this 96-year-old. I think of her, how does she look? We just create this image, right? Maybe she's 30, maybe she's 20, right? If you lose a kid and they're a toddler, are they 50 when you go see them in heaven? I mean, how's that work?
Yeah. Look, I wonder if
I have a lot of dogs. I wonder if all my dogs are waiting for me.
I don't want to offend people who are listening to this, but I have so many questions about all of this heaven and hell thing. And I actually wonder if hell is getting reborn on this earth again, right? Because I'm going like, let's face it.
Tell you, in Texas, it's getting reborn. In America, Mississippi, it's
exactly. I do sit there and I go, Jesus, like, I'm not a billionaire. And I don't think being a billionaire is a great life either, right? Because there's like, you take Kim Kardashian, God love her, right? She's got loads of money, but she gets slated in the press. Pink gets slated in the press. I mean, nobody is sacred, right? At the end of the day.
No.
Right? Not nowadays.
And, what we know, one of the things we know is a study of happiness. This is now it's off to another topic here, but one of the things we know is about this in all the studies of happiness. We know that more things and more fame don't make you happy. No. It initially makes you happy when you have the new car and the new stereo and the new plane and the new jet boat and all these other things, but that happiness wanes really quickly because you get used to it, and then it's the next thing. That's why why do famous people that we look at and we say, wow, they really have it together, or they're sons of famous rich people, they're all killing themselves, right?
And taking lots of drugs to disappear out of their world, right? And I'm going, so yeah, no, I know. I would like to think that we're just floating around the universe, like visiting different areas, and like you die and you get like an extra superpower, which like you get superpowers, which means one, you're invisible, right? Because it's just your spirit floating around. And two, you can go wherever you want. It's like you can fly like Superman and go wherever you want and visit whoever. Like my mum's in the UK. So, God, I don't want to talk.
Boy, Claire, if that were true,
touching wood, right? But like,
I'm going to make a list of people I'm going to be invisible at and go stalk them and push them.
Oh my God. Exactly right. But it's like a superpower, right? So just go and stalk a few people, haunt them a bit, go and stalk somebody else. Like, oh my God, do you know what we've done? We've gone down that complete rabbit hole.
So let's come back to grief.
Well, let's come back full circle.
So the point that I was trying to make with this is that grief, when you think about this piece, like I was talking about with the grandparent example, right? The magnitude of the loss that we feel and the magnitude of the grief that we feel is directly relatable to the love and connection we have to that person in our life. That's why I was asking you about your friends and family, and neighbors and stuff and their grandparents, because you don't have a connection to them. So even though they're a life and even though they're a grandparent, you don't feel the loss directly in the same way because it's your grandparent. It's your grandmother. It's your son. It's your daughter. It's your husband. It's your brother. It's your sister. That really comes to play around the magnitude of the grief that we feel.
Yeah.
And so if you think about this, if we lived a life where we had no grief, right? That your son died, you didn't have any grief for him. Your parents died, you didn't have any grief for them. No grief. That means that you lived your life not giving a shit about anybody or anything.
So I'm a sociopath then.
And there are some out there. But for those of us who are not sociopaths, just as an example, so what that really means is that when you're really feeling a lot of grief, it's not something to feel bad about or something to get rid of. First of all, it's just an emotion. But secondly, that grief means that you have lived your life incredibly well. You have lived your life in a way that you built deep, profound relationships. You took risks. You opened your soul. You bared your heart to another person. And when that person is gone, or dog or cat or whatever, that you feel that.
Wow.
Because of the depth of your relationship with that other person. So really if the fact that we have grief, that's something to be really grateful for. Because if we didn't, we would just be shitheads and have a crappy life.
And grief is natural, isn't it? Like grief is absolutely natural. Everyone feels it at some time in their life, whether they've lost a person, lost a pet, lost a relationship, because that's great. People can grieve about childhood houses, like, you know, if they leave the home, we can grieve about anything. And I suppose that's why I asked the question, what is grief, right, at the beginning? And I said at the beginning, we're going to talk about death, but it's death of a thing. It can be a person, it can be a thing, it can be a place, it's a moving on, it's a change in somebody's life.
That's it. Yeah. And the big thing that you said about grief being natural, the thing that I would add to that is that grief is neither good nor bad. It just is, like any other emotion, right? Laughter is not good or bad. It's just laughter, right? Anger is not good or bad. It's just anger. Sadness is not good or bad. It's just sadness. But with all emotions, we can fuel. This is the important thing to be aware of around this. And this is not just with grief or anger or sadness. If we fuel an emotion, that could become problematic for us.
Wow.
And we want to not do that.
And so let's unpack that then. When you say fuel an emotion, give me some examples, because I probably know how I would fuel an emotion.
Let's think about anger for a second, right? You're angry because, something feels off to you. Or you're angry because there was some injustice or somebody did something wrong. And the anger came and gone, right? Someone calls you a name. You're at the grocery store and somebody, calls you some really horrible name.
I know how I'd react.
And you react. You might be really angry in that moment, and you're done. You scream at that person, you walk away. However, some people will walk away and then 24 hours later, they're home and they're like, that fucking person, how dare they talk to me that way? And it goes on and on and on. Do you know the voice in your head, Claire? Crazy Claire? Right? Like I have got Crazy Scott, who is, and all these listeners probably have a crazy one that talks to them too. That voice in your head can fuel your anger to the point where you're just ready to rip your hair out. And then you're going down the street, down the road at the grocery store, and there's another innocent bystander and you lash out at them because you're so angry. Right?
I used to do that with driving, but I've reframed it now because I used to be like, why are you driving 30 k's below the speed limit? I'm like, rah. Because I always had to get somewhere. I always had to I'm just driving in my zone, as it were. And
I'm in the fire department. I have a colleague on the fire department, and she is, I can say this because she's not going to hear it because she doesn't listen to the podcast because she's a curmudgeon to begin with. But she is so angry and negative, and everything about her is, you talk to her and say, how's it going? And she just starts bitching and moaning about this person, that person, the government, the weather, this thing, that thing, her house, her on and on. Nothing. And she's just angry all the time.
Draining.
Right? She's fueling that. She's fueling that. And yes, things are tough, and there's difficulties, but you fuel that anger, right? So hopefully you and your listeners especially can see that piece around anger. It happens with sadness, right? Somebody sees things in a doom and gloom way, and they continue to fuel it by thinking doom and gloom thoughts. And what was a rainy day in their mind's eye turns out to be a hurricane of sadness and despair, and on and on and on and on and on, right? Because they're sitting around saying, I'm all alone. Life sucks. This is bad. They're fueling it, right? And true, their life might suck, but it doesn't suck 24/7. Right. Well,
you've got to look for the rays of sunshine in your life, right? And I must admit, I probably get a bit fuely when it's PMT time and I go, oh my God, because the hormones are raging. I'm PMT, which doesn't happen very often at 50, I have to say. Thank God for menopause. But then there's a whole different world of hormones that are hitting my body at the moment. So hey ho.
So does that mean you're going to write a book called Menopause is a Gift? If I'm saying grief is a gift,
are you writing a book about menopause as a gift? Maybe I should write it. No, it's so not a gift, believe you me. I feel that people who are hitting the menopause need therapy, right? Because it's a whole different world. It is. Oh my God, your body changes. Don't even go there. It's like...
So this is another, the example of like menopause. So emotions are going to come up and they're going to already be volatile, right? And so, but what is like, it comes up and it goes away. If you have a hot flash, it's not going to last forever. It's going to go away.
I keep thinking it's going to be great. I won't have to buy female products. Just keep thinking about that, right? I will not have to go through this one. So, I might be a little bit bigger, whatever, that, my teeth are falling out and my hair's going funny, but it'll be fine. It'll be okay. All these hormones are a good thing.
Yes.
And we all go through it. So it's all good. It's like, I'm not the only one. So the same
thing can happen with grief that we're talking about here. Like you experience grief. There are some people that experience grief and grief comes up. Like if I were to start talking to you about something, my grief is going to come up because that's just the reality of that situation. But I am not actively fueling it. I'm not sitting at home at night, rolling in it, talking about it, going through, a great example of somebody who is fueling it is going through like picture albums over and over and over again at night, purposely, right? And they're crying and picture that image of somebody doing that. I have pictures of my husband as I walk down the stairs. I see him every morning. I say hello, I touch the picture, it's a grounding part of my day, but I'm not actively, going through albums and, I had to turn off.
It's almost like you've got a cut and you're poking a hot poker into it to just expose it again.
That's
not a good thing.
Right. But if you just have a cut and that cut hurts and you're like, oh, it's really hurting me right now, got to put some ice on it. And then you maybe get up in the morning and then now it's not so bad as it was yesterday, but tomorrow it might be a little worse, but it's just a cut.
Yeah. And the thing is, at the end of the day, there's a scar left from that cut, right? You're never going to have that person removed from your life. And you're never going to forget them, right? And you wouldn't want to. Like, I wouldn't want to forget anyone in my life. I lost a really close friend of mine in the UK 8 years ago, maybe 9 years ago, who committed suicide, who was a really close friend. Even to this day, I sit there and I go, he was 52, and I sit there and I go, what could we have done? Why did he do this? He was obviously in a place where he felt he couldn't get out, call for help, do whatever. And it's like I'm angry at him and I'm frustrated. I'm not maybe as angry as I was back then, but like, I don't want to forget that person. That person was a gift in my life. There we go. But he was, and I grieve him. And there are things that crop up and I go, oh, I wish he was here so I could tell him X, Y, and Z. But life has to get on. And I'm grateful that he was in my life. And I enjoyed so many moments with him, so many crazy moments. I think Crazy Claire came out a lot when I was with him, but, but hey, so like, can you fix grief? How do you fix it? Can you sort it out?
It's not, would you want to fix laughter?
Well, no.
Would you want to fix anger?
Well, yeah, maybe that.
All right. So wait a minute. So this question, when would you want to fix anger?
Well, when it's hurting people.
There you go. That's the piece. The same applies for grief. It applies for laughter. Wow. If someone is laughing hysterically and they just can't stop and they are like, cuckoo, you come up and talk to them. They can't even have a cogent conversation about, the news without laughing and acting hysterically. That's probably going to be a problem and they're going to need to get some treatment. And the same thing with grief. If somebody is, that grief is interfering with your life to the point where you can't get out of bed or you can't, function in any way whatsoever, then that's something to talk about. But if it's just a blurb, why would you want to fix it? Well, would you want to fix your grief? When you were talking about your friend?
Yeah.
People can't see this because this is a podcast.
Yeah.
But we're Zooming right now, and I could see your eyes, Claire. I could see your eyes glossing over when you talked about your friend.
He's a special person in my life. Just like
you loved him.
You have special people in your life. Yeah. He was a mate. Yeah. He wasn't a boyfriend. I have to say that. Two people who know me and everyone listening, like he was like I would class as a very close friend. But we didn't go like down the boyfriend.
But you still loved him. You cared about him, right?
Yeah, exactly. I just, there are some people on here who may listen who are back in the UK who go,
that wasn't clear.
Okay.
Found out about it on the podcast.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh my God. So, oh dear, this all goes, Anyway, coming back out of the rabbit hole of my relationships and my scandal, which wasn't a scandal.
I'm the guest, Claire. You're not the guest on Scott's podcast.
I know, what the fuck. Okay, all right, here we go. Right,
so you'd asked. I'll tell you this piece, and you'll see. You'll see this right now, and your guests or your listeners will hear this. So you had asked me when we started this because there's a hyphen after my name, except
there is,
right?
And so G. Scott.
I'm G. Scott Graham.
Yes.
But my email address is G. Scott Graham Stevens.
Yes.
And I think you had said to me, should I introduce you as G. Scott Graham or G. Scott Graham Stevens? And I said, well, the name in all my books that I've been writing since I've written 15 books.
I know.
And I'm working on number 16. And I started writing in like 2014 or 15. And so all my name on all my books is G. Scott Graham. It's all the same. It's kind of my pen name. It's now my pen name. After my husband died, I decided that I wanted to change my name so that I could carry him with me as we move forward. And, when we got married, I didn't take his name. I still kept my same name and he kept his name. And so I decided I wanted to do that in America. But it's probably the same way in other countries. It is not easy to change your name unless you're getting married or divorced. Then it's easy to change your name because there's a legal document to do that. But in America, if you want to change your name, you actually have to go to court and petition a magistrate and appear before the magistrate. And then the magistrate has to come up with a court order and they decide whether or not you're going to change your name. And then they actually go back in time and change your birth certificate.
What?
And you get a new birth certificate, because in America, our birth certificates, our driver's license, and our passports are all linked, and they don't want some terrorist coming up with someone's fake name and bombing a building. And so people on their driver's license we have this thing called Real ID that's spread across the country, where your ID is verified with who you are, and your ID matches your driver's license, matches the name on your birth certificate. It's across the board, because they don't want some crazy person pretending to be somebody else and then flying a plane into a building.
The world we live in. But yeah.
And so it's not a small process to change your name. And so after Brian died, it was like 2 months after that, I decided that was an important thing to do. So I had to go to the court and petition. And a friend came with me, and off we went to court. The judge asked me to tell my story. And so I told the story about how he had died.
And that was only 2 months. And that was only 2 months after your husband had died.
Yeah, because I had made that strong decision that this was a thing I really wanted to do.
Yeah.
And so I went to the court. I told her the story of, why it was important and why I wanted to carry on that name. By the time I finished the story, the judge was in tears. The court reporter was in tears. The people that were there watching was in tears.
We're all human.
She said, "It is such an honor to sign this petition." And then she looked at me and she said, I know you're doing this because you want to carry him forward and have that symbol of him carrying forward. She said, I don't know if you thought about this, but, every time now for the rest of your life, when you go to write your name, he'll be with you.
Yeah.
It was such a powerful thing to share.
And God love you for doing it. Because you're honoring him for the whole of your life.
Right.
Until both of you are little spirits that can go around and haunt people, and with your superpowers of invisibility and extra flying.
Right. So for me doing that name change was about kind of acknowledging that moving forward, because we spent a lot of time in our relationship talking about our visions of our lives and where we wanted to go.
Wow.
And so I know what his vision was of his life. And so taking on his name means that I'm committed to just not carrying on my vision, but his vision and the things that he wanted to do. And so part of that was establishing an animal rescue, which I'm the executive director of, and we're rescuing farm animals, and because that was a piece that was really close to his heart. Sure. But I'm doing that because Scott Graham Stevens is doing that, not Scott Graham.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
Yes, it does. It makes complete and 110% sense. Yeah, no, it does. And like, go ahead. What? But you turned your grief into something positive, though, because your husband's vision was, and I have to say, and I don't know whether this is why you and I resonate. If my view I don't want. And I've spoken to, we've got a fantastic guy who's on the radio here, Gus Warland, whose goal is, because he's lost a mentor of his, is zero. We have 9 people in Australia every day that we lose to suicide. 9 people. I think 6 of them are men, or 7 of them are men, and 2 of them are women, right? And his goal is to bring that figure down to 0, right? And I agree with him. That's one of the reasons why I started this podcast, is because I had really dark days, not days where I thought, okay, this is it, but because I had my son, right? And thank God I had my son. But, you know, you turn them into positives. Well, and I suppose that's what I would do. And I think that's why I said to you, you say sometimes people can fuel grief or fuel anger or whatever. And I try and turn it into a positive, which like seems as though that's exactly what you've done.
Yeah.
By honoring your husband.
I mean, in some ways, I think it's, for me, it was really figuring out the identity of where I wanted to go. And kind of honoring that and moving forward, and certainly trying to spin things around in your head can work. But here's the problem.
Yeah.
Here's the problem with that is that, and the problem with that is Crazy Claire or Crazy Scott, because when I am trying to turn something around in my head, Crazy Scott already knows what Scott is trying to turn around and is already coming up with rebuttals and other things that are going on in the back of your head around why that's not true and total bullshit. You know, and so, I mean, because Crazy Scott is always one step ahead of me in his wackiness, just like I'm sure for your listeners, the crazy voice in their head is just one step ahead. And so turning it around can be a strategy. It's a very hard strategy. It's much better or much more effective. I shouldn't say better. You'll get greater success by just accepting that this will pass. This is just my sadness, you know, is just today.
So to sit in it?
Not to sit into it. Not to
wallow in it, but to
it.
just experience it.
Right.
And let it flow.
Like clouds in the sky that are just passing over. Right?
Wow.
And you protect yourself. If it's a rainy, cloudy day, you put on a rain jacket and go out among the day, right? And deal with that. You put the things in your place to kind of protect you from the consequences of that. But it's like the rain's going to go and it's going to be a sunny day a couple days from now. The part that we miss, and this is a piece about suicide that I feel really strongly about. You can see this. I don't know what studies you've done in your country. In our country, they've done studies, and they totally ignore these studies. It's like the studies about guns that we do in America, but everybody still has a stupid fucking gun. But
don't get me started. That's a whole massive crater that we could go down. I've come from the UK. I live in Australia, you know. I mean, we got rid of our guns when we had a bloody gun thing go off in Tasmania or wherever it was. And I'm English, so it's a big thing here. And we had a gun amnesty and then that was it, right?
Study after study has shown that suicide hotlines do not work to stop suicides. People don't call, and that's the reason is that why do we have them? I think when we know that study after study show they don't work. I can tell you this as a person who's not only done that stuff, but I worked as a clinical supervisor for a suicide hotline, and I was on a suicide hotline when I was in college, and I worked as a suicide hotline when I came out of the closet. It was the gay hotline geared towards the gay community, and you have mostly on those hotlines, you know, people who struggle with friends, are lonely, and call in a lot. Frequent flyers, you know. Buddy from, you know, Brandon is calling in, you know, for the third time this week. Yeah. And people on those hotlines know they're like, they know these people. They're like, oh yeah, and they usually say to that person, like, you know, how you doing, buddy? We'll talk for 10 minutes and then we got to let you go. And that's one of the things that happens on these hotlines. But if people are going to kill themselves, they're going to.
Oh, no. They're going to. They don't talk to anyone. So
this is what you have to do. This is what you have to do is that you have to normalize conversations about whatever's going on. And when I say whatever's going on, I'm talking about the emotion. So as opposed to reminiscing and wallowing in it. So I'll give you two different questions here. I'll give you one for sadness, and I'll give you one for grief.
Okay.
For sadness, all you do is turn to somebody and say, how's your sadness today? That's it. That's it. You don't say, let's talk about what's going on in your life. How's it going? You don't wallow in it with them. You don't ask them to reminisce about what they're sad about. You want them to have a conversation, you want them to not have a conversation about the things that they're sad about. You don't want to roll in their sadness with them. You want to have a conversation with them about their sadness and the level. So how's your sadness? Oh, well, I really miss. Is your sadness different today than it was yesterday? Well, yeah, it's a little bit different. But, I really miss, sometimes I think, what am I going to do? So you still have some thoughts going on around stuff, and we're not going to fuel that. But it sounds like your sadness is a little bit better than it was yesterday. Nice. If people can have that same thing with grief. Right. So before I move on to that, so I just wanted to share with folks this thing about clouds that I was talking about earlier.
Oh, yeah.
That I was just talking about now, because your listeners should have experienced the clouds rolling by about 5 minutes or 10 minutes ago when I was talking about changing my name. You probably felt that through the airwaves, my grief, my loss. You probably heard it in my voice. But I'm not fueling it. It's the clouds have passed because I'm not wallowing in it or throwing other stuff in it. It's on, if I tell you about a funny movie that or a scene in a funny movie that I'm like, I really love The Big Lebowski. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie. I love that movie. And there's a few scenes in that movie that I can watch those scenes, over and the end scene when his friend is blowing the ashes in the air of his dead and it goes all over Jeff Bridges' face. I will fast forward to the scene in that movie and laugh. And when I talk about that movie, I laugh. But when I'm not talking about that movie, I'm not laughing hysterically. Right.
Yeah.
When I'm watching that scene over on my DVD or my, Roku as I'm streaming it, it's absolutely hilarious. When the scene's over and I'm watching something else,
you're on to the next thing,
right? The clouds have passed, right? So the metaphor I use is that, one of the things that has happened to me since Brian's death is I've had 2 knee replacement surgeries, total knee replacements.
Wow.
They cut my knees out completely and they replaced it with this metal and other stuff. Everybody.
My dad is now going to have that in the UK, so I know your pain.
Everybody. So what you just did here was empathy. So that's an important thing. You just like, I get it. I know but you'll probably talk to your dad after he has his knee operation, probably for years. And you'll be like, how are you doing, Dad? He'll be like, I'm fine. And what's going on? Blah, blah, blah. And you're probably going to say, totally normally, totally authentically, how's your knees doing? They'll be like, well, it's bothering me. I was talking to somebody today because one of the things that happens when you get a knee replacement surgery is that you can't straighten your leg. And you have to go to physical therapy and work to straighten your leg. And if you don't get it to a certain point, it's going to stay.
He's going to hate it, but he can't walk any distance. Yeah. So he has to sort it out now. It's got to the point of no return. So he has to do it. He's going to hate it, but
you're going to ask him, how's your knees, Dad? Right? Can you straighten?
Yeah. Well, maybe I might do for the first few months, but I know what you mean.
I'm telling you, people that I hardly know, come up to me and say, like I'll be on a fire scene or I'll pick something and going, and they're like, "How you doing? You okay? How's your knees?" Right? Because they know that
Yes,
I've got these.
I get the context.
I have especially if I'm wearing shorts. I have these 10-inch scars down the front of my knees that you can clearly see. Somebody just asked me about that.
You need to make up a good story about that, though. You need to make up a good story, not a knee replacement. You need to say, right, I was dropped from a helicopter on my skis, skiing down a mountain. You need to make a good story up, right? That's what I say to anyone who's got a scar, right? Make a good story up about it.
In your free time in the middle of the night, you should Google scar tattoo. And you will see people that have turned their scars into crazy tattoos. And so I was thinking of turning my one scar until I got both knees into lightsabers, because somebody had turned them into Star Wars light. I'm like, that's a really cool thing.
There we go.
I know.
Anyway, carry on. You were talking about.
So the idea behind it is normalizing the conversation. So you turn to somebody who's struggling with depression. How's your sadness? And they're going to talk about how that was. And they're going to say, yeah, it's not as bad here. It's not as bad there. Or like when someone asks me about my knees, I'm like, I'm really now working on my right leg, which I had replaced 8 months ago. I'm now making a conscious effort to go up 2 stairs at a time when I go up the stairs with my right leg. Because my left leg's pretty strong because it happened 2 years ago. But my right leg's still weak. So if I skip a stair and do that, that's going to help strengthen it. I got to take a bigger step. And so a friend asked me, how's your knees? And I said, well, this is just what I shared with you, right? That's just what I'm doing and how it is. I'm not complaining about, they're not asking me, does it hurt a lot? I'm not wallowing in the story behind my knees. Right. So You're not wallowing in the story behind the sadness. You're not wallowing in the story behind the grief. You're just saying, how's it going? Specifically, beyond how's it going with grief? So the best thing you can do, if you know someone who's had a loss, you see them and it hasn't been a while, you turn to them and say, how's it going? How's your grief? Because if you just say, how's it going? People are going to say, fine, right? In America, we've got you can go to the grocery stores, and when you get to the checkout line, the cashier turns to you and says, hi, how are you? They don't give a shit about how you are. They don't want to know how you are. They don't want you to turn to them and say, let me tell you what's going on. All those other people behind you in line are going to go apeshit if you do that. They just want you to say, fine, and you?
Yeah.
And you're expecting that grocery person to say, I'm fine too. Because if they turn to you and say, I can't ring up your groceries right now because I'm having such a hard time, and you're going to be like, shut up. I really don't care.
Oh my God. Just put them through. I don't care. All right. Yeah, no, exactly.
Most of the time because that's how we're trained to interact with folks, when somebody is really having a hard time, we ask them, how are you? And it's no surprise that you get, I'm fine. And then somebody blows their brains out.
Yes.
The next day, right?
I know.
Because that's how we act. That's how we talk in the grocery line, everywhere. How are you? I'm fine. Or I'm good.
We have something over here which is called, and it was yesterday actually, we have an Are You Okay day. And I'm like, and we had, God love my work because I work for an awesome company, right? But we had a meeting where everyone was going, are you okay? And what do you do to stay okay, right? And at that particular time, I wasn't really okay, but I said I was okay. Because I was like, I don't want any of you guys to know that I'm having a really tough time. I've had a horrible 3 months. My son's been off school sick and X, Y, and Z, right? And I was like, I'm okay. But you're right. But you're right? And I'm like going, but none of these people are going to want me to verbally throw up all of my issues on them, right?
Correct.
I do have people I can talk to. I'm all good. But and I'm okay, right?
Anytime.
But they say, oh, you should ask it twice. You should ask it twice, right? And I go, yeah, and I'd probably just say, I'm okay. No, I am really okay. And then I wouldn't be. Do you know what I mean? I'm going, asking it twice doesn't actually
you're going to be like, I told you I'm okay. Fuck off.
Yeah. You know me too well. Yeah, no, exactly right. Exactly. But no, and I think that's That's really, what you've just said is really good, because I think there are times where, and my son's just lost his grandmother, right? If we're going to, like, we'll bring it to, like, so my ex-partner's mother died probably about a month ago, 5 weeks ago. And look, she had dementia in a home, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's horrendous for everyone involved. And my son didn't really know her very well. And I actually really don't know how he's doing. So I haven't been asking, are you okay? Every 5 minutes, but we try and talk about his grandmother. And he had, of all things, they were doing grandparents at school 2 weeks after he lost his grandmother. Right. So I was like, oh my God. But how do you approach this with kids? Like, if they've lost somebody in their life.
First thing is that and listeners, do not take this the wrong way. You don't want to talk about his grandmother, except in the context of how's your grief. So you want to be like, when you think about your grandmother, you got feelings that come up, or you see that piece where you see some tears and come up. You turn to your son or your daughter, your kid, and you say, you know what you're feeling right now? What you're feeling is grief. And that is totally okay that you feel this. That's not a bad thing that you feel. Grief is good. It's just, it's a feeling. And so then what you have is you've educated your son or daughter and yourself when you know what grief is. And you know what they know what grief is, because you're like, this feeling that you're experiencing, that's grief.
Yeah.
And so then you're in the position where you can turn to him and say, how's your grief?
Right.
You can turn to him and say, how's your grief around your grandmother? Or someone loses a dog. How's your grief around Puggles, if that's the dog's name? I don't know. And so you then have an opportunity to talk about that. If you engage, and it's okay to say, you know what, it's your grandmother's birthday or this, let's share our favorite memory. And then when they're going to share that piece, their grief's going to come up, like when I was talking about changing my name. And then you say, what you're feeling here is normal. That's just grief. And here it is. And then you're back on to talking about pizza and the next television show or this thing or that thing. And then you're like, hey, how's your grief? And they'll be like, what are you talking about? See, it went away because you didn't fuel it. Emotions come and go. And that gives you an opportunity to teach a person that not just grief comes and goes, but sadness comes and goes, anger comes and goes. You get a kid, your son gets really mad at you or something, and you say, you know what, you're feeling angry right now. And then you turn to them and you say, they're calm because they're, eating or doing this or doing whatever. How's your anger? They're like, what are you talking about? And you're like, well, how is it? Well, well, what happened to it? Where did it go? And that's a really good, healthy conversation to have. Where did it go? Did you make it go away? How did it change? I don't know. Things just come and go as long as you don't fuel it. And then that dovetails into this whole suicide piece, because then people are then talking about emotions as they are. If you just ask your son, are you okay? He's going to be like, I'm fine. I'm good. I'm all right.
And especially if he's 6, but especially if he's a teenager, teenagers are just going to go, yeah, whatever. You don't understand
and if
me.
If you have somebody that goes, yeah, on those things, or you're getting bleh around something, give them a scale to rate themselves on.
Okay.
That's the scale. You can turn to somebody and say, I'll ask you, Claire. So just thinking about your grandmother in the last couple of days on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being, whatever, or 0 to 10. And 10 being totally paralyzed. Where's your grief around your grandmother in the last 24 hours?
1.
There you go.
It's one.
And so if I ask you tomorrow and said, where's that at? And it was particularly difficult for you, you might be a 7.
Yeah.
Or a 6 or an 8 or a 10. And then you can be like, why did you say 7? This is the key thing to say. Why did you say 7 instead of an 8 or instead of a 6 or instead of a 1? You were a 1 yesterday. What changed? Why is it a 7?
Yeah.
Boom. End of conversation. If you turn to your kids and say, how was your day? How was your day at school? They're going to be like, good, fine. Okay. Got to go to my room. If you turn to your kid and said, how was your day at school? And they said, good. And you said on a 1 to 10 scale, 10 being the perfect day and 1 being the worst day imaginable, where's it at? They might say, they're going to give you a number, and then you can say, why is it a 6 or why is it a 5? And then end the no interrogation after that. That's the way to communicate with you. If you really want to start communicating with your family and your kids and really doing that, this 1 to 10 scale, it's what EMTs use. They say, how much is your pain on a 1 to 10 scale?
Yeah, it is. It is.
Right.
Which is great after you've given birth, because you're going, well, it's bloody 9. Give me some drugs. Like, I don't care what you're doing. Like, you know. And it used to be frustrating after having a cesarean, because they would go, right, where are you at? What? And I'm like, I've had a cesarean. Give me whatever drugs you can, please. You know, have you got any of that pethidine stuff that you keep giving Michael Jackson? I'd like some of that, please. So it's all good. It's all good. I don't want the epidural ever again. But
I had that when I was in the hospital with my knee replacement. And, healthcare is so expensive
anywhere,
in America, right? So, I was in there the day afterwards, and I was like, they're like, what's your pain level? I said, don't worry about what my pain level is. What do I need to tell you so that I can get some, narcotics here? And I'm an EMT. They knew I was an EMT. So I was like, I'm in a lot of pain. I want some narcotics. And they're like, are you really in pain? I'm like, look, I'm paying thousands of dollars a day to be here in this bed. I want some narcotics while I'm hanging out.
Well, the funny thing,
boring as shit.
Yeah, just knock me out. The funny thing was, I didn't see it because obviously I was in so much pain, but they gave me pethidine and there was like a syringe full of it. And they only gave me like a little bit of it. And like, there was a whole syringe left. And like my partner, my ex-partner.
You're like, can I have a doggy bag?
He was like, what's going on with the rest of it? Like,
I paid for that.
Yeah, exactly. Which is so bad. It's so bad. But, he has a point. Like, you do pay for it. What happens to the rest? Like, can we bag that up for later? It's like, can we have a takeout? But, hey-ho, we digress. Look, thank you. Because
we've digressed again.
We do. Oh, it is such a pleasure. I love talking to you, right? It is such a pleasure. I don't know where they've been hiding you, but they should bring you out of hiding a lot more often. It's lovely talking to you. And you have such an awesome way, such a command of the microphone, if I'm going to take it to a podcast word, because you're right. Like, I'm going to try this on my 6-year-old when he leaves school today, because you're right. He's 6 and he goes, all right, fine, whatever. Like, I do find out a lot more stuff when we're sitting down and doing stuff because he's a boy. So you have to detract the mind from actually doing the talking and make Lego with them to get them to talk. But anyway.
Right, exactly.
So look, if you're
speechless, you're speechless. You're like,
and I am though. I always, when I come across anyone who has lost somebody, right, and I think everyone would be in a similar situation. You just don't know what to say because you haven't got that. You're not feeling the emotions that they're feeling, but you don't also want a bombardment of like, a waterfall.
Platitudes are useless. Platitudes are useless. And what to say, Claire, is exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
You remember what you just said?
No, I can't. It just goes out my mouth and I forget it.
You said, I just don't know what to say, and I don't want to make a mess of it all.
Yeah.
So you go up to the person who's grieving and you say, hey, Bob, I just don't know what to say. I don't want to make a mess of it all.
Fair enough. You just got to be genuine.
I can't imagine how much pain you are in. You don't say things like, well, you don't start farting rainbows, oh, they're probably with Jesus. Oh, it's probably better off. It was this, it was that.
They had a good innings.
What'd you say?
We normally say they've had a good innings. If they die old, then you say, they had a good innings. And you go, that's not helping anyone.
That's not helping anybody, right?
No.
It happened for a reason. Right. All things happen for a reason. Good things will come out of this.
Yeah.
Your life that's all awful shit to say.
Yeah.
And if you've ever been on the receiving end, and you will be on the receiving end, when that comes your way, turn to people and say, that's not helpful.
Yeah.
You got to have, because
I thought you were going to come out with profanities then.
No, and they give you more if they continue to do it. That's where you turn to them and say, "Fuck off! That's not helpful. I told you that's not helpful."
No, that's fair enough. So look, because you have written 15 books, right? You
variety of topics.
Are an amazing person. We're all amazing people. I'm going
to listen.
Are an amazing person.
This is going to be part of the podcast, this amazing person part, because I'm going to listen to it over and over and over again at night.
Oh yeah, no, you can take a snippet of it and you can just you can have it as your ringtone. Have it as your ringtone, man.
I'm going to put it as my ringtone. Claire saying, "You are an amazing person."
You are, yeah. Somebody's ringing you, you'll go, "You are an amazing person. You are an amazing person. You are." And people will look at you like some freak.
Who's that woman with that accent? Saying you're an amazing person.
Well, and they'll go, "Really? Is this some positive personal development trip you're going on?" It's like, what the flip? Yeah, no, it's okay. Ask me to say anything and I will for your ringtone. It's all good. I don't mind. I'm easy. But look, where can our listeners connect with you? Get your books, listen to you have a podcast.
You can go to gscottgraham.com. That's easy to find.
Yeah.
So GSCOTTGRAHAM.com. You can Google G. Scott Graham and Google will serve you up. My picture,
come up everywhere.
Books about that I've written and all kinds of other stuff. And then my podcast. Yeah. Claire, I think somebody is going to be on that podcast soon.
Who's that?
You.
Me?
It's a micro podcast called Follow Your True Azimuth, and you get to hear inspiring stories that are only 4 minutes long about how people have followed their true path, irregardless of what everybody else is telling them to do. You're doing that.
Do you know what came to mind then? I thought that, maybe. It's 4 minutes. Look, how do you think I'm going to cram in stuff in 4 minutes? I can talk the hind legs off a donkey, so this is just going to have to really
no trouble filling up the 4 minutes. That's
oh my god, thing. I know, and it'll be fine, I think. But what came to mind there? I went, do you know what? 4 minutes is perfect time. If you need to go to the loo, listen to your podcast.
That's why I made it so short.
4 minutes. Perfect. Do you know what? I couldn't think of anything that would take 4 minutes, but I don't know what I'm doing in the loo for 4 minutes. Probably hiding from my son. It's all good, but yeah. What else takes 4 minutes? Sorry. Waiting for a kettle to boil. That would be a better one than sitting on the. Oh,
I went and just got the monkeypox vaccine. Because it's all over the place.
Does that take 4 minutes?
But the nurse was trying to, I'm like, so when can I get laid again and not have to worry about monkeypox? I'm like, tonight, tomorrow, next weekend, what? And there's all this stuff about, they've changed the dosage here in America and all kinds of other stuff. She's like, well, she says, you don't really need to worry about the monkeypox vaccine if you're having sex with somebody, because here in Vermont, it's not carried over a lot. And then she turned to me and said, and she said, you really have to have prolonged skin to skin contact. And I turned around and I'm like, what do you mean prolonged skin to skin contact? She said, at least 3 hours. And I said, well, I don't have to worry about that because if I'm having sex, I'm done in 3 minutes and then they're out of here. I didn't even need to get the monkeypox.
So I don't even need to get the monkeypox vaccine.
Yeah. I don't need to worry about it for.
Oh my God.
I can't imagine having sex for 3 hours. I would be exhausted.
I'm a woman, so we're all right. We can imagine it for like all day. It's great. But, hey.
Not me. That's why I said 3 minutes, I'm done. Get out.
We have to give you a rest in between. We don't need a rest, but you guys do. If however we were created, they created us right. That's all I'm going to say.
There you go.
You guys need a rest. That's all I'm going to say. Yeah. So look, thank you so much for coming on board.
Welcome.
You're definitely coming back to talk about my kid might be gay.
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely. I'm looking forward to that.
We need to explore that. This is all about having those conversations, getting that difficult subject and difficult conversations out there, so that it's normal. It's like giving people tools to be able to have those conversations.
And it's just, it's almost this whole piece about talking to your son about being gay or not being gay or whatever is about laying the groundwork. Just like I talked to people today about laying the groundwork for grief and emotions by normalizing them early on.
Yes.
Normalizing those early on, 1 to 10 scales, easy. Get people to talk about their feelings instead of just, how you doing? Okay, whatever. And then when people are talking about their feelings in a genuine way, then you can intervene before somebody is suicidal. That's not the time to intervene.
Yeah, I agree.
Just like the time to intervene when someone says you don't want to be the cool parent when your kids tell you they're gay. You want to be the cool parent long before your kids tell you they're gay.
And I agree with you. Because otherwise they're not going to come out and tell you they're gay.
Right, exactly.
Trans, whatever it is. Yeah, exactly. So look, thank you for coming on the podcast.
You're welcome.
I've got one more question. God knows what you're going to answer to this.
Uh-oh.
What book? No. What book would you recommend to my listeners and why? And it can't be one of your 15 books, right? Because I'm already promoting all of those.
I was just looking at one of my 15 books. You know what one of my favorite books is? Although he's a bit of in reality, he's a bit of a train wreck. I really love David Goggins' Can't Hurt Me.
I've read it. I love it too.
That's a really powerful.
He is a train wreck.
He's a train wreck guy. He's gone through like 3 marriages and all this other stuff.
I know.
And so,
if there's one person that's focused, he definitely is, but he's only focused on himself. And I'm not sure the emotional.
Right. So you have to take it with a grain of sand. And even when he's kind of talking about pushing through with when he was an Army, Navy SEAL, with the hair fracture on his leg and taping it up with duct tape, or not preparing for these 100-mile runs and getting through it by eating Oreos, saltines, and Gatorade and being sick afterwards. It's about the perseverance piece, but he's not a good role model for healthy living.
No, definitely not. He is insane.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is a good read. I agree with you. I've read it and I think it's to get your head into that focused area for periods of time. That's what I'm saying. For periods of time, it's really, really good. Look, thank you, Scott, for coming on the podcast. We'll get you back. It's all good. But thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's been such a pleasure. Yeah. It's
been a pleasure. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your night.
I will. You too. Enjoy the rest of your day. Start of your day, right?
It's Thursday, so it's nearly the weekend. Happy days.
It's Wednesday here in the States.
I know. Sorry.
I know. Bye.
We hit the weekend before you. It's party time, but that's okay. It's all good. All right, honey. Thank you so much. I will see you later.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed this podcast and you would like to hear more, please hit subscribe wherever you like to hear podcasts. If you would like to support us further, share this episode with your friends and family. And finally, drop us a review on iTunes, as I'd love to hear your thoughts, comments, and ideas. It all helps me to understand and produce awesome content you want to hear just like this. If you want to check out our past episodes, write to us, appear on the podcast, or for links, resources, and show notes, go to our website, www.strongsingleandhuman.com. We are also on all the usual social media platforms, Insta, Facey, and Twitter. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I hope to see you back here again soon. Be kind to yourself, and remember, no one is perfect. We're all just putting one foot in front of the other and doing our best. I'm Claire Martin, and you've been listening to the Strong, Single and Human podcast.